Hello, welcome to our EV Ready building session discussing approvals. This video aims to help anyone interested in preparing their buildings for EVs understand the key stakeholders who will need to approve the work. I'm joined by David Levine and by Malcolm McComas, who have gone through this process in their own buildings, and by Fred Tuckwell from the Owners Corporation Network. So, how did you manage the Owners Corporation approval process in your building?
Yes, it's like an elephant. You got to eat it in little slices. We had to make sure that we sensitized ourselves to the fact that most people just saw this as ultra big, ultra strange. Where do we start? What do we do? Why does it impact me? I'm not getting an EV. What should I be doing? So our strategy all along was just to bring people on one piece at a time. So we formed a subcommittee initially of 3 people from the committee of 9, and those people started working on the project together. The first motion that we ever put to an AGM was a motion to start research into it, not to actually do something. So just to enable people to take on board the fact that we were going on this journey. The assessment that was done by the assessor who completed it for our building, that was used along the way just to demonstrate what we were doing. From then, once one motion was done, the assessment then got done, then another motion was put forward just to do the visitors parking first. Low-cost solution, easy, satisfied the needs of the early EV owners. And then later on, of course, the full EV building readiness. By that time, everybody was pretty much on board and had really understood the value of what we were doing.
So you mind if I just jump in? One of the things that we're keen on understanding is whether it's something which originated from a particular owner or whether it was the Owners Corporation being proactive. What's your experience in that?
My background is in energy assessment, energy efficiency and renewable energies. So I understood already quite a lot about EV ownership and EV charging. The important thing is that whoever's getting involved should be either sitting on the committee or very close to the committee or influential to the committee, particularly in a big building like ours with over 100 lots. So to your question, I think I started it, but there was a group of 3 who had been on the journey doing energy efficiency, doing other things in the building. So we had a small group of people who were keen to push the thing along, and through our various actions, we brought other people on all the time.
Okay. And how about in your building, Malcolm?
We've got a slightly different situation with 11 apartments in Wallara, and we had a general discussion first at the committee level, but there are 9 of the 11 residents on the committee. I think I'm the treasurer, actually, so I just thought it was a useful thing to do. We should be ready for it. We had 1 EV in the building at the time, and it was just literally plugged into the power point at its particular garage. So we had a general resolution. We had 2 goes at this, actually. We had a general resolution to say let's proceed to at least get a consultant to do the project. That was a relatively small cost, and our contribution was funded by the government, co-funded by the government as well. So we started there with the general resolution. We then did the report, and then for phase 2, which required an execution of a deed, we did a second resolution with the specific requirements provided by the government under the EV Ready program to approve the installation of the program.
And can I ask what percentage of your residents were supportive of the plan at first?
So for the first phase, the shared charging, I think our vote was around about 60% for. And for the second round, 100% for.
Great.
All of our people were on board on day one. I think we had 100% for all resolutions because they just thought that this was an opportunity that we should pursue, future-proof the building, add value to it, and it was a subsidised program.
Great. Fred, what bylaws or resolutions are required, and how does the building go about putting those in motion?
So we believe, and I represent OCN, so we believe that you should have a bylaw when it comes to EV charging. There's things like, the overall load of the building, make sure that you don't trip the circuit breakers, a whole lot of reasons, for doing that. So in the first instance, we believe you should have a bylaw, whichever way it goes. Secondly, it's similar to a renovations process, because really what you're doing is adding a bit to the electrical infrastructure of the building. So it's a renovation thing. So most buildings are familiar with renovations. So if you simply say that it's an addition just like a renovation, it makes it a bit simpler for people to understand. Normal resolutions, particularly when it comes to buildings, you need a 75% vote, or no more than 25% against. This is a sustainability resolution, so that makes it a little bit easier in that there's only 50% vote required. So it just makes it quite an easier thing. And the point that I made previously, it's important that the owners' corporation understand whether the request is coming from an owner, which takes you down a particular path of the owner maybe footing the bill and sort of doing some of the legwork to attain a meeting or a special resolution or a bylaw, or whether the owners' corporations, which these two guys here spoke about, want to do it, which in that case it's more proactive, future-proofing the building. Then you go to a general meeting or an AGM, and Schedule 1 of the SSMA talks about all of the details for that, and there's masses of information about how you go about that. There's a notice period going into the general meeting, of depending on whether it's a general meeting or an annual general meeting. And the motion needs to authorise the works to actually physically do the stuff, and then make a bylaw. And then finally, after that gets approved, assuming it does get approved, then you've got to register the bylaw. After that, you're done.
So what support is there for people that want to look up bylaws and resolutions and motions for their building?
So there's a fair bit of support available. Firstly, you might ask your strata management agent, and strata managing agents have a lot to do, and they're usually very busy people. And just like any other business, there's good ones and bad ones. And some strata managing agents do know a fair bit about electric vehicle charging, and others don't. So that's a place to start. Strata lawyers, if you're going to need a bylaw, some people like to have an individual bespoke bylaw done by a lawyer. And of course, OCN, we actually have a bylaw. And the advantage of the OCN bylaw is that normally with a bylaw, there's a whole lot of conditions and blah, blah, blah as you work your way through the process. Ours has just got one set of conditions, and it has a register attached to it in which you use to register each of the individuals who want to be connected. That means you only have one bylaw, and then you just make additions, moves and changes to that bylaw. It just simplifies the whole process. Sites like FlatChat are useful. Jimmy knows a fair bit about it. Fair trading, you can actually get good advice from fair trading on this sort of stuff, and it's growing the information and the knowledge base of EV charging and bylaws and how you go about it. And of course, the EV building ready site. There's a host of information in there, as you would say. But there's an important thing which I think was touched on earlier, is that we should be encouraging people, if they want to get involved. One of the issues you do have in strata, and we collectively represent that here as grey-haired white males, and the propensity of our generation is only 13% are likely to want to buy an electric vehicle. So if you're not in that generation and you want to have an electric vehicle, get involved. Get involved in the strata committee, help them make decisions, help them go through it. Be knowledgeable, find out. There's lots of resources. We have lots of resources. As I said, the EV Building Ready program has lots of resources. Just get involved.
Great. So how did you work with your strata management companies to ensure that the right bylaws were being passed?
We relied on the draft bylaws or resolutions, I think they were, contained in the funding deed provided by the EV Ready program, and we then had a lawyer independently review the deed we were about to execute if it was approved, and they gave us a sign-off on that and said that was an acceptable document, and we put that to a general meeting of unit holders, and it was approved unanimously from day one.
How about in your building, David?
My experience was absolutely identical to Malcolm's. So the EV Ready program was really helpful by providing us a bylaw template, which required very few tweaks to make it work for us.
Great. Did you need to engage a strata lawyer?
We didn't. We've got a good strata manager who had done this before, and he just said, well, look, this was a recommendation that was appropriate. He drafted up the notice of meeting. I think our committee is commercially confident, and we were happy with the documentation, and all the members, all the unit holders were happy with the documentation as well, and the resolution, and that went through with no issues raised. I don't have an EV myself, so I have a hybrid, and but I'm sure I'll buy an EV at some stage. So I think debiasing your opinion, and I'm the treasurer of the body corporate, so I wrote up a short memorandum once we'd had the independent report done to make the final recommendation to go ahead with the report and the installation, and that was part of the package that went out to unit holders and was subsequently approved.
And did you engage a lawyer?
We did. We do that for all of our bylaws, and we particularly wanted to understand from lawyers who had experience in the space, and there are not many, about what we should be putting in there with regards to the unknowns to us, such as maintenance, keeping it in good shape, modifications to the site, what happens with the sale, where does it sit, all of those sort of things we had to cover in the bylaw as well. So we did engage a lawyer. It was quite useful to do that.
And did you engage with your insurance company as well?
We absolutely did. It was quite pleasing to hear when they came back and they said absolutely no change at all. And they did make the comment that if there are going to be any issues with batteries and charging and everything else, it's most likely to come from cheap other forms of electric vehicles, such as bicycles or scooters or something like that. So they were very confident that nothing would change. So it did not change for us at all.
We had a similar experience, and we talked to our broker, and they came back with the same advice. And we also had done some independent research to figure out where these supposed fires and fire hazards were coming from B-grade charges for scooters. We haven't had to address that issue yet. None of our residents have electric scooters.
And what's the insurance industry's position on EV-ready buildings, Fred?
We've done quite a bit of research on this, and it's an interesting thing. People say, electric vehicles, the world's going to fall in, and you read particularly the conservative press, and that's certainly the view. But let's just think about the facts for a minute, and the facts that the overall drivers of insurance premium increases are nothing like that. They're bushfire, they're storm, they're hail, they're floods. We only have to look at the last 5 years, and particularly the last 2 years, 2023, hottest year yet, only beaten by 2024, hottest year yet. So the whole thing about electric vehicles is to stop this global warming. So that's the driver. OCN has got and has been engaged by the City of Sydney to do some disaster planning, and we're just in the second phase of that. And what they do will have a template for buildings to use. So rather than go off half-cocked, let's do some proper analysis and sort of get to the bottom of that. Strata insurance increases, this is in strata, it's not about anything to do with electric vehicles. Their increases, so previously I was referring to general insurance increases. Strata insurances really is about defects, inflammable cladding, but the biggest one is intermediary commission. So, you've only have a look at the ABC exposés, and what's been happening is that intermediary commissions are increasing, and some of them gone up, 20%, which is reasonable, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80% commissions. So that's what's been driving insurance premiums. And we've been working with fair trading to make sure that the industry is fairer in respect to commissions as they go along. There are, as we referred to before, lithium-ion battery fires. But the point here, and the insurance company, and this comes out of a CHU report, is to focus on mitigation, which is really what these guys are saying. Choose carefully, check for damage, store and charge correctly, and proper disposal. That's how to deal with it. But EVs, and it's proved, research after research after research, are far safer. And if you're going to be stupid about saying you need to have a insurance increase for an EV, well, what about petrol vehicles? They're 20 times more likely to catch fire. Why wouldn't you have insurance increase for petrol vehicles? Because that's where the risk is. So, and there's also nonsense like weight and building loads within it. And that originated in a report that cars, particularly SUVs and dual cab utes, are just getting bigger and heavier. And sure, there may well be an issue with weight in the building, but the Australian standards, when you look at car parking design, allows for the weight of 3.4 tonnes per car space. And electric vehicles are way lighter than that, but they're not as heavy as the big dual cab utes and things like that. So that's another nonsense. There's just myth after myth after myth come up on this stuff. But fundamentally, the point they made previously is that most of the insurers are just saying, okay, just notify, advise or wherever it is. And if an insurer does say, well, I want to increase your premium, go and find another insurer.
Okay, thank you.
An interesting point too, with our annual fire statement, which was done last week for our building, absolutely no issue whatsoever on the list for rectification. It shouldn't be; it's a brand new installation, but it hasn't caused an issue for that important piece of annual reporting.
So with the shared charging in your building, did you need to discuss this with a planning authority?
No, it was not required. We had our strata manager validate that, and we didn't have to make any applications to any planning authority.
We didn't either. We've got one shared charger in our 3 visitor parking spaces, and that's BYO cable. Download an app, wave a credit card, and you can charge your car if you're a visitor, or if you're a resident if you want to. So that was straightforward.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.